A very good morning to all. Today, moving on to the next topic, that is about sources of fresh water. So in the last class we discussed where does rainwater go? It goes into rivers, lakes, and from there it flows into seas and oceans. And where do we get the fresh water? So we know that water is very, very essential for us. And where do we get this fresh water? Let's see the sources of fresh water. The first one is rain. So we get fresh water from rain. So rain is one of the main sources of fresh water. So we know that most parts of our country receive rain in the rainy season. It does not rain evenly throughout the world. If we take the example of tropical rainforest, it receives rain throughout the year. It receives rain every day. Then what about deserts? It gets very little rain. Then what about coastal regions? So the coastal regions receives good amount of rain. So it does not rain evenly all over the world. Rain is one of the main source of fresh water. Rivers, lakes, ponds receives fresh supply of water during the rainy season. So during the summertime, the wells or ponds, it gets dried up and it can be recharged only when it rains again. So the well, pond, rivers, it gets dried up during the summertime because it can be recharged only when it rains. So, rain is one of the major sources of fresh water. Moving on to the next source of fresh water, that is groundwater. So, groundwater is one of the most valuable source of fresh water and it supplies water to wells and lakes, and from there we get fresh supply of water. As the rainwater, it seeps into the soil, it wets the soil, and the excess amount of water, it seeps deeper into the ground and it fills the spaces in the rocks. So that is known as groundwater. So the level of water under the ground, we call it as the water table. So in some places the water table is close to the surface. So the groundwater can be obtained by just digging a well just a few meters deep. But in some places the groundwater level is very deep, so that in such places two wells are sunk several hundred feet below the ground. And the water from such two wells are not safe for drinking. So that is about the groundwater, which is another valuable source of fresh water. Let's discuss what is droughts. So we all know that we depend on water for all our basic needs. So in order to grow crops, we need water. So in order to carry on our day-to-day activities, we need water. So we know that water is very, very essential in our day-to-day life. And agriculture, let's take the example of agriculture. We discussed that for growing crops, we need water. So agriculture, it is dependent on rain. So that any change in the average rainfall, it can affect farming as well as supply of drinking water. So when there is no rainfall or if the region receives less rainfall, what happens? All the day-to-day activities, it gets badly affected because we all depend on water. When there is no rainfall or when that region receives less rainfall, then there will be shortage of water and even the crops fail due to lack of water. Even the vegetation and animals living in the region will also get affected. So it can greatly affect all living things. The next is that if a region, it does not receive adequate rain for successive years, we call it as droughts. So what it is? If the region, it does not receive rainfall for successive years, that is called as droughts. So the wells, ponds, rivers and lakes, it gets dried up. So when there is no rain, what happens? The wells, the rivers, ponds, it gets dried up. That is, the water gets evaporated. Then in that condition, in that drought condition, what happens? There will be shortage of water, the land gets dried up, and it is not possible for us to grow crops in the dried up land because we need water to grow crops. It can greatly affect the cattle. So all this leads to food shortage, and that can lead to malnutrition. Even it can cause death due to starvation. So that is called as drought. So we need water. Water is very, very essential in our day-to-day life. And if a region, when it does not get adequate water for successive years, it can lead to droughts. The next is about floods. So when a region gets rainfall continuously, what happens to the rivers, lakes and ponds? It gets accumulated with water. So the water then overflows and it can result in flood. So flood, it can damage the properties of human beings. It can even affect the life of human beings. It not only affects human beings, it can cause damage to animals, plants, etc. So we can say it can cause damage to all living things. It can cause waterborne diseases like typhoid, cholera, etc. So during a flood, the water, it will wash away the top layer of the soil. So we know that the top layer of the soil is very, very important for the growing of plants. So the flood, it will take away the top layer of the soil, which will not be suitable for the growth of plants. So it can greatly affect all living things. So in coastal regions, floods are often caused by cyclones. So what is a cyclone? So it is a severe ocean storm with strong wind and heavy rains. So that is called cyclones. So in this class, we discussed about sources of fresh water, that is rain and groundwater, and then we discussed about droughts and floods. So you have an activity in page number 200, that is the activity zone. How much water do you use usually for the following activities? So following activities are given. You need to write how much water you use daily for these following activities. So once you are done, you can submit in Microsoft Teams. So we are done with the topic. We'll meet in the next class and we'll discuss the last topic. So till then, thank you.